We begin this morning, though, with the new move from President Biden in hopes of preventing an all-out war with Russia.
The U.S. is deploying about 3,000 troops to Eastern Europe, with fears growing that Russia could invade Ukraine. The Pentagon says 1,000 soldiers based in Germany will be deployed to Romania, and 2,000 troops from Fort Bragg in North Carolina will go to Poland and Germany. Of course, Russia has about 130,000 troops surrounding the Ukrainian border. Around 8,500 U.S. troops had already been placed on alert. The Pentagon says this new deployment is in addition to those forces on standby.
Those 8,500 are not currently being deployed, but remain ready to move if called for the NATO response force or as needed for other contingencies. We do not know if Russia has made a final decision to further invade Ukraine, but it clearly has that capability.
NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin is in Kyiv, Ukraine, and NBC News correspondent Cal Perry is in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where troops are preparing to leave for Europe. And Cal, let's start with you. What is behind this decision to send more U.S. troops to Eastern Europe?
Well, according to the U.S. military, it is to reassure and to shore up our allies, certainly on that eastern front with the Ukraine. This is a unilateral move between the U.S. and these countries. It is not a NATO movement. We can show you exactly where these troops are headed. We have a graphic. As you said, that first move, 1,000 troops headed to Romania. That is an internal Europe move. They are coming from Germany. 2,000 troops here from Fort Bragg will be headed to Europe. We can break down those units. 1,700 of them will come from the 82nd Airborne. They will be headed to Poland. The remainder at 300 will actually be headed to Germany from the 18th Airborne Corps. These are units that are designed for this, Joe. They are designed to be deployed in short order. The 82nd Airborne prides itself on its website in being able to be ready in under 18 hours. So it's not really that unusual sort of movements, sort of a day here on the base. That is the micro. The macro, of course, is a much different picture. Our Aaron McLaughlin will sort of lay that out. But anytime you move thousands of U.S. troops in theater, that's sort of what they call it, it is a big deal. We don't have a timeline on when those movements are exactly going to happen. It will be sort of in the coming days when you listen to the Pentagon spokesperson, Joe.
Let's go to Aaron. You spent some time along the border of Ukraine and Belarus. So what's the Russian military buildup like there? And what are you hearing from the people who actually live and work along the border?
That's right, Joe. This really critical border crossing between Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine is located just a 3.5-hour drive from where I am here in Kyiv. And it's becoming an area of concern for Ukrainian military experts because just beyond the border, inside Belarus, they say Russia is amassing a presence of up to 30,000 Russian troops with command and control capabilities, which security experts I've been talking to say that would allow them to conduct operations very quickly. Now, the Kremlin, for its part, saying that that the forces are there at the invitation of the government of Belarus, and they're there for security exercises. Nevertheless, this has been identified as an area of vulnerability because the majority of Ukraine's military presence is currently trained on the east of the country, on the conflict to the east. I was at that border crossing yesterday speaking to the handful of border guards that are there patrolling the situation. I spoke to one Ukrainian border guard, and she told me that she's been instructed that if she sees anything, to call the Ukrainian military to ask for backup. I was also in the nearby village, and it was really interesting talking to the villagers. They have known decades of peace. It's not fathomable to some of the villagers that there could be the possibility of war. Take a listen to what one shop owner had to say.
No, there will be no war. The war is somewhere else. We don't have a war here. No, there is no war. And Russia is fine here. Everything is fine. Maybe there's a war in eastern Ukraine, not here. Belarus is closed. The only problem is COVID.
Speaking to the truck drivers stopped at the border, and they gave a very different picture. They're extremely concerned about war. I was talking to one Russian truck driver who told me he is incredibly worried. He said that young lives will be lost if Russia decides if there's some sort of military action here. Joe.
So, Cal, troops in Fort Bragg have been watching all of this closely. They trained for this. We know Fort Bragg is the largest U.S. military installation when it comes to population. How are they preparing for this deployment? And what is the impact then on the Fort Bragg community?
Yeah, you never want to use the sort of term business as usual, because it's not business as usual if you are one of those service members who's leaving your family and getting on a plane for Europe. As you said, 250,000 people live here on Fort Bragg, so it is sort of the normal way of doing things. We've heard from former commanders of the 82nd Airborne who sort of say their wishes on how they would like people to sort of address the situation. Take a listen to what one former commander learned tonight.
I think the people of America should be confident that if 18th Airborne Corps headquarters is a choice to lead a task force, they're well manned, they're well trained, they're well equipped, and they're well experienced in those things.
The other thing I would say, Joe, is when you look at who is being deployed, again, these are units that are deployed frequently. The 82nd Airborne had part of its unit deployed to Afghanistan recently to help with the evacuation there. We have tens of thousands of troops already in Europe. In Germany, the 300 troops from that 18th Airborne Corps will be joining more than 30,000 troops in Germany. Romania will see a doubling of its troops. So there is a constant U.S. presence in Europe. It is nothing new sort of for these troops to cycle in and out. What is new, of course, are the circumstances and what is surrounding this deployment.
And Aaron, briefly, what is the Russian response to the U.S. sending more troops to the area?
What we heard from the Kremlin spokesperson earlier today, essentially accusing the United States of escalating the situation. The spokesperson saying, quote, Russia's concern in this case is absolutely understandable, absolutely justified, and any measures taken by Russia to ensure its own security and its own interests are also absolutely understandable. This as the Ukrainian defense minister this morning saying that they continue to see Russian troop buildup, Russian movements along the Ukrainian border, Joe.
Aaron McLaughlin, Cal Perry, thank you both for kicking us off this hour.
Now, this morning, President Biden is heading to New York City to address the nation's recent spike in crime. He's expected to tout his administration's strategy to fight gun violence. The president will be joined by Attorney General Merrick Garland and will meet with New York City Mayor Eric Adams and New York Governor Kathy Hochul. The visit comes just a day after a funeral was held for NYPD officer Wilbert Mora. He and his partner, Jason Rivera, were fatally shot in Harlem after responding to a domestic violence call late last month. NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee joins us now for more on this. Carol, good morning. So what is on the president's agenda today? We mentioned who he's meeting with. Tell us how that's going to look and why he's chosen New York to talk about this issue and what he's hoping to achieve.
Well, in terms of the why, Savannah, it's largely because the president is trying to go somewhere that's really experiencing the kind of violence that he's wanting to address and essentially tell Americans that this is something that's a top priority for him. New York, as you noted, is feeling this very acutely at the moment, and so he's going there to meet with the mayor and the governor, and particularly the mayor is somebody that the president and this White House sees as an ally in the sense that he has a common view of how to address these issues as the president does. So the president's going to make two stops while he's in New York. He'll stop at NYPD headquarters where he'll attend a meeting focused on gun violence, and then he'll also go to a public school where he'll focus on community intervention. So what you're seeing is the president try to address both sides of this issue here.
And Carol, if we remember, the president actually outlined the bulk of his strategy on gun violence last summer. But I mean, we're talking about this now because we've continued to see crime rise across the country. Is there anything new he's announcing today? Are there any signs that these measures have been working, or will there be a renewed push here given how difficult it's been for the president to implement his agenda on guns?
Yeah, it's more the renewed push here because a lot of what the White House is highlighting is stuff that the president has already announced. He's already outlined his agenda, and there's some of the things on the screen there. He's using measures to try to stop the flow of guns that are used to commit violence, support local law enforcement, and invest in community violence interventions, and expand certain programs, opportunities for young adults, and help individuals who are incarcerated re-enter the community. So those are the kind of buckets of areas where the president and the White House are trying to make headway. But as you know, this is something that he talked about and he outlined last year, and it's just without Congress, according to the White House, there's really not much he can do.
All right, Carol Lee, thank you so much.
This morning, we're tracking that massive winter storm that's slowly moving across the country. The storm dropped more than a foot of snow in some parts of the Midwest, creating chaos on the roads and in the skies. Nearly 90 million Americans are still under a winter storm advisory this morning as the system moves east. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky joins us now from Dallas, where they're getting a mix of everything today. So, Morgan, what are conditions like now? How much snow and ice could they get today?
Yeah, Joe, conditions have deteriorated starting really in earnest about 8 p.m. last night. That's when the temperature began to drop here, and we had a cold rain that overnight has turned, I don't know if the light's catching it just right, but a freezing rain. And that is a serious problem because with snow buildup, that can at least kind of fall on top of itself and prove to be somewhat of a travel hazard. But with this ice accumulation and it not really going to snow, that's only building up a layer of frozen glaze on a lot of area roadways. An area mayor in a Dallas suburban town said it could be an absolute travel nightmare if that gets up to be about a quarter inch of nothing but ice with these sustained temperatures that we're seeing below freezing for potentially about the next 36 to 48 hours here, Joe. We've had this steady freezing sleet, rains falling now for about 6 hours. And as a result of that, we know that there was going to be a serious power demand. About 50,000 people are already without power right now statewide. Joe?
Yeah, we can see it, Morgan, and we can also hear that ominous, sleety sound. So, of course, last year, the state's power grid failed during that major winter storm, leaving millions of Texans without power for days. Officials seem confident they've made changes to stabilize the grid and avoid a repeat. How is it holding up so far?
Well, the grid itself appears to be performing as it needs to. Officials will say that one of the main reasons it's doing so right now is that they made sure that there was more reserved power available going into this winter event than they had at this time last year when Winter Storm Uri left around 250 Texans dead as a result of those incredibly low temperatures that knocked out power to millions of people. As it stands right now statewide, we're looking at about 50,000 people without power. However, it is important to note that those could be local outages, Joe, caused by if you have a buildup of ice on a power line or a tree branch that knocks it down. That could be the cause there, as opposed to the system-wide outages that we saw a year ago that were leaving hundreds of thousands of people, millions at one point, in the dark and the cold. Joe?
And Morgan, quickly, what is the impact on roads and airports right now?
It's not good. It's not good. If you are driving through this area, which you should not be, it's going to be incredibly slow going. We know that in some areas that ice is building up. It is only going to stay cold and below freezing for the next at least 24 to 36 hours, so don't expect that to go anywhere. And right now, Joe, it is looking like it could be really treacherous travel for the majority of Texas for quite some time. Joe?
All right. Stay safe, my friend Morgan Chesky. Thank you so much.
So what areas will be impacted by this slow-moving storm today? Let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Bill Cairns is with us with the latest. Bill, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. And what a rough morning for so many schools and people dealing with cancellations and delays. And I mean, you saw there in Dallas, obviously schools all closed there. And you like to hear the ping. The ping is fine. Sleet, you can shovel. You can move it out of the way. Yes, it's treacherous to drive on, but it doesn't do the damage that freezing rain does. The freezing rain is much more problematic, and that's the issue today. That area in purple near Memphis, all the way down along the areas right along Mississippi, western Tennessee, the western half of Kentucky, all under ice storm warnings. That's where the worst of the icing is this morning. We have 107 million people still from New Mexico all the way to Maine that are dealing with the winter weather. And when you look at the radar, remember the green and the yellow is the rain. We actually have severe thunderstorms possible today in Louisiana to add on top of all of this. The pink is where we're freezing rain. The peachish color is where there's sleet. And then the white and the blue is where there's snow. It's like a rainbow. It's like a Skittles bag from Texas all the way up through the Ohio Valley. As far as the forecast goes, middle of the day today, still watching that snow from Oklahoma. So, sleet should change over to a period of brief snow in Dallas. Will snow pretty good in St. Louis to Illinois. And then we'll watch that icy mess still from Little Rock to Memphis through Kentucky. That's where we have the greatest chance of power outages because of the ice. And then tomorrow morning, we're going to have that freezing rain and sleet potential in southern New England. Northern New England will get a decent snowstorm. So we're not going to add a lot more snow to the ground. We've already had totals around 4 to 6 inches around Oklahoma City and Wichita, Kansas. St. Louis snow totals have been about 6 inches. You're just about done. We'll add another 3 to 6 in Indianapolis. Chicago, by the way, ended up with about 8 inches. And some of the heavier snow will be in northern New England later today and tonight. That's where it will be treacherous. And then ice to the south of that, guys. So, yeah, everything but the kitchen sink today
really.
across the weather maps.
Oof. Lots of rain here coming for us. All right, Bill, thank you. See you next hour.
That's right.
And now to the latest on the pandemic. An FDA advisory panel is set to meet later this month to consider emergency use of Pfizer-BioNTech's 2-dose vaccine for kids under 5. And this morning we have a conversation to bring you with one of the founders of BioNTech about the vaccine, the variants, and the future. NBC News correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from London after traveling to Germany to get this rare access. Molly, good morning. Tell us about your time spent with these scientists and what they said about vaccinating our youngest kids. Obviously, this big news that some parents are excited about and some are hesitant about.
Hey, Savannah, Joe, good morning. Look, it was absolutely incredible to meet them. We met them at BioNTech headquarters, of course, where the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine was created. And actually, our whole crew, by chance, had the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. So it was actually kind of an opportunity to say thank you. We did ask them, though, about the big news this week. Take a quick listen to what they had to say about kids and vaccines.
Let's start with the reaction to your company and Pfizer going to the FDA for approval for kids 0 to 5. Was this expected? Is this exciting?
This is, of course, exciting because this is the last group missing. And we are, of course, excited that if the meeting goes well, that we could get the authorization also for this group.
Is your expectation that the data will show 3 shots is a better response?
Yes. I believe the last 12 months have shown us that this is a 3-dose vaccine. Yeah? And when we started the pediatric immunization program, it was still this idea of 2 doses might be sufficient, but in the meantime we know the vaccination is complete if we have 3 doses.
Is the point to get these small children vaccinated now, is it to lower their already low risk, or is it really to help control the spread in the population more generally? Or is it both?
So the Omicron variant has shown that small kids are affected. There are a number of hospitalizations. So there is a medical need which can be addressed by a vaccine, and that's also the reason why the FDA is really concerned to accelerate this process.
Now, they also said getting those 2 shots immediately or as soon as the FDA approves will start to build that immunity, even though it doesn't have the expected immune response that they expect to see after 3 doses, which is when the vaccine will be complete. Guys.
So, Molly, this new news here with the kids is big news, but also one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is if we're going to have different vaccines for different variants. We've already dealt with multiple waves, different variants of the coronavirus, of course, Omicron right now. How fast are they able to react when a new variant pops up? And is that something that could still be on the horizon for all of us, a different vaccine for the variant?
Absolutely. And that was one of my big questions to them. How soon we all go back to the office, get back to normal, keep our kids in school depends on how quickly scientists, of course, can react to the upcoming variants. Now, they already have an Omicron-specific vaccine in clinical trials. We asked them how quick their turnaround speed could be. Take a listen.
How quickly can you react to a variant?
So in principle, we are technically able to react to a variant in about three months. Now the regulatory authorities have to come also with their opinion what kind of data is needed, yeah? And therefore it could take more than 3 months because it's the first time.
Is that going to be too slow for Omicron?
Omicron is pretty fast, so this is a super fast spreading virus.
Now, he did say by the time he hopes the Omicron-specific vaccine could be authorized by about April, he estimated. Actually, 50 to 60% of the world will still be Omicron negative. So there will still be a lot of people, including people who got early Omicron infections, who will be in need of this variant-specific vaccine.
All right, Molly Hunter, great interview. Thank you so much.
Let's bring in Dr. Amish Adalja now. He's the senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. So, doctor, when we talk about vaccines, we, of course, tend to think about the traditional shot in the arm. But right now, nasal vaccines are being developed around the world. What's the benefit of a nasal vaccine versus a traditional shot, and any downsides?
There's no real downside to using a nasal vaccine, and it's really all upside if you can actually manufacture a nasal vaccine. So one thing is very obvious. You don't have to have needles. You don't have to have syringes. You don't have to have trained personnel. So it makes it much easier to administer, and it also captures those people who have needle phobia, who don't want to get a shot. But the main reason that nasal vaccines are really interesting for a respiratory virus is that it induces a different type of immunity. When you get infected with COVID or any respiratory virus, it goes in through your nose and mouth, and that stimulates a different type of immunity in terms of which type of antibody gets generated. And the types of antibodies that are on your nose and mouth or in that mucosa there are really, really important when it comes to blocking infection. So a nasal vaccine might be something that is more sterilizing, meaning it prevents you from getting infected in a way that the vaccines that you get through your arm into your muscle cells don't. So that's what the real holy grail is trying to figure out how to stimulate that nasal immunity to get more robust immunity.
Now, another question for you, doctor, on vaccines. So new data from the CDC shows roughly half of those eligible to receive a booster shot, so they already had their doses initially, now it's time for a booster, have not gotten one. Now, we know not everyone wants to get vaccinated in the first place. That's something else we're dealing with. But now we're talking about people who already went through those first 2 rounds of shots. Why do you think those booster numbers are so low, and does that concern you?
It concerns me in the sense that there are certain high-risk individuals who have not gotten a booster, someone who's above the age of 65, someone with medical conditions like obesity or emphysema or asthma. Those are the people we really need to get boosted because those are the ones whose breakthrough infection might not be mild. But what I think happened is a lot of messaging changes that confuse people, because first it was targeted boosters, which actually is supported by the data, and then it became universal boostering. And I think that dilutes the message that there are certain people that really need to get the boosters to prevent hospitalization.
Great point.
And we do want to get to a question from one of our viewers. It's from Hernan Chavez in Oregon, and it says, we know COVID-19 is likely here to stay. My question is, at what point could we consider COVID-19 an endemic respiratory disease rather than a pandemic? A popular question there.
To me, the biggest transition point would be when you don't see 1,000 or 2,000 plus people dying every day, and when you don't hear about hospitals worrying about capacity. So in many parts of the country, they might have already reached that endemic stage, but as a nation as a whole, certain regions are still experiencing too much disease, too much morbidity and mortality in a way that we don't with our other endemic respiratory diseases. We are getting there, and we may be there on the other side of Omicron, but we'll have to see, and it's really about hospital capacity and deaths.
All right, hopefully we do get there. Dr. Amish Adalja, as always, thank you so much. And if you have a question for one of our doctors, let us know. You can email us at morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com. And please let us know if you'd like to stay anonymous.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.